On today's episode, Graphic Man shows us how the story of Fantastic Four, number 9, could not have happened.
In looking at the cover, we see where the Fantastic Four have gone bankrupt, and they are forced to leave their home in the Baxter Building. The story starts off with a news broadcast about the Fantastic Four being bankrupt. I don't know about you, but I am impressed with the technology the Submariner has. I can't imagine how difficult it would be to receive an underwater television broadcast. But maybe he was using that clear TV antenna that we keep seeing advertised. You know, the one where the guy gets in a boat and can watch the ball game in the Gulf of Mexico, where everything is flat and there are no trees or mountains to get in the way of the broadcast signal. Anyway, perhaps Prince Namor has a great satellite TV hookup back in 1962, but this is the kind of problem that arises, and we haven't even gotten started on the main problem, when in this very picture we have another rabbit trail. Note the portrait of Susan Storm. You might say, big deal, we all know that Namor has a crush on Sue, and of course he would want her photograph. But did you ever wonder how he got that photograph all the way down under the ocean? And the paper photo is still in really good shape? Maybe you don't worry about these things, but I sure do. So here's what probably happened. The Submariner, remembering how beautiful Sue Storm was, and desiring to have a picture of her for his groovy undersea bachelor pad, left the ocean and once again returned to the land of us air breathers. And once upon dry land, he searched diligently until he found some portrait of Susan, and he stole it when no one was looking. I also imagine that he got some waterproof briefcase or some sort of airtight container and some decorative picture frames and other such materials. Otherwise, he would be risking some bad damage to the portrait depending on how long it takes to swim to his underwater sanctuary. But I want to be fair about this. There is another possibility of how Prince Namor got the portrait. He could have painted it himself from memory. I guess we'll never know for sure. Dr. Doom even noticed this picture when he came to hang out with Submariner back in issue number 6. Namor doesn't seem to be a good host when company pays a visit. Just look at him making Dr. Doom stand there while he himself takes a load off. Anyway, back to the real problem. The Fantastic Four are broke. All because Reed Richards made a few bad investments. And now the bill collectors are demanding payment. Reed is a brilliant scientist, but he must have made some very bad investments that went south. Now, to put a little historical perspective on this, there was indeed a rough stock market problem in the middle of 1962 called the Kennedy Slide, which was one of the nicknames given to this rough time. The other 3 members of the FF volunteered to get jobs to bring in some money, and believe me, they could have brought in millions. For example, the Torch could burn up all kinds of trash for the city dump, or could have helped out performing some specialized welding, or testing fireproof materials in laboratories. The Invisible Girl could have allowed her services to be used for some businesses who were having trouble with shoplifting, as she could capture people who think there's nobody around watching them. Sometimes people hire private investigators to follow a husband or a wife who is suspected of having an affair. The point is, there's numerous things she could have done, and the Thing could make a fortune in the demolition business. He can move entire buildings. He can lift cars. He can smash cars. Whatever business hires him would more than quadruple their productivity. And did we mention that he can fly fighter jets and spacecraft of all kinds? But no, Reed won't have any of that. He's going to suffer, and therefore everyone else must suffer. He compares the others getting normal jobs as if that would turn them into a freak show somehow. Yes, according to Reed, if the others use their powers to get money, that's a freak show. But does Reed really have a problem with supposed freak shows? If you'll recall, just a few issues ago, Reed got a fan letter from a boy in a hospital, and staring out of a window from the Baxter building, he notices that the hospital where the boy is staying is nearby. So Reed stretches about a block away to surprise visit the boy thanks to a conveniently opened window. So Reed obviously doesn't have any problem using superpowers in a freak show method when it's his idea, and believe me, if you looked up and saw this, you'd classify it as a freak show. No, according to Reed, the only sensible thing they can do is to sell all of their stuff. When the Thing objects to this strategy and rightly labels Reed as a lunkhead for placing every dime they had on bad stock investments, notice that Reed says back off. He's too proud to let the others bring in money to make up for his bad decisions, so everything must go. And here's where I feel the Fantastic Four would never have been homeless. The stuff they accumulated over the last 8 issues would more than make up for a stock market crash. You'll be amazed that the amount of money they need to come up with is $1 million. Now that's a lot of money to the average person, but $1 million could easily be accumulated by these heroes if Reed would just let them go and earn it. They could probably earn this amount in 5 or 6 days. But since we're selling things, let's start with the Fantasti-car. How much do you think someone would pay for this at auction in 1962? Do you think our military would be interested in a vehicle that could fly around very quietly and, according to Stan Lee's dialogue, uses air power, whatever that is, instead of gasoline? And it can be steered very easily by anyone in the family? And did I mention that it can even be set to run by itself? Here Reed instructs the Thing to set the controls on automatic. I don't know why Reed couldn't have done that himself. Yes, the Fantasti-car even lands itself. How much would that technology be worth back in 1962? But wait, there's more. Did I mention that it separates into 4 flying vehicles, and each one could be steered independently? I imagine a lot of rich families would be in the competition to see who could be the winning bid in an auction. The Ferrari cost $18,000 back in 1962. There were 36 of this particular model made. It can't do a tenth of the cool things the Fantasti-car could do. I think they could easily get $1 million for it, let alone the military or even a foreign government would pay the $1 million. Here's an early diagram of some of the stuff the Fantastic Four has. Starting on the top left, they have a Pogo orbit plane. It could orbit the Earth and make small space flights. How much would that sell for back in 1962? During the space race and all with the Soviet Union. There's an easy $1 million to be had right there. Next to it is their helicopter. Their helicopter could surely get more than $50,000, especially if they autographed it, right? On the far right, they have their own passenger missile, specially designed to not shake the building when launched, which would be a very strict building code, I would imagine. Now, how many millions would that go for? And we haven't even covered the stuff that Stan Lee forgot about. Way back in Fantastic Four number 2, the FF find and used the Skrull spacecraft that was disguised as a water tower. They used the same spacecraft to return to Earth, so they still have it. Now, how much do you think a spaceship is worth? Could that possibly be 50 or 60 million? Do you think our government would be interested in 1962 of having a spaceship that could get to the moon in about 20 minutes? Or do you think the government would rather wait 7 more years and design a rocket called Apollo that would take 4 days to get to the moon and not even be able to land? A few months later, the Fantastic Four acquire yet another spacecraft, and they fly it back to Earth. This all happened in issue number 7. So they have 2 spacecraft capable of interstellar travel. Do you think anyone might get into a bidding war down at the auction house? Not only do they have 2 spacecraft capable of interstellar travel, plus their pogo plane that can get into space for small missions. Even at 1962 prices, this would come close to $1 billion, and I'm being conservative. They have some comic books as well. Here Reed is probably holding a DC comic because he laments that those superheroes don't have any money troubles, so he's probably referring to Batman or the Green Arrow, who are filthy rich. They even read Marvel comics, as we have seen in their 5th issue, but this is 1962 and comics weren't really worth that much back then, and besides, the way they handled their comics, nobody would have wanted them anyway, so there's not much value added there. But they do have some interesting Art Deco pieces that are probably worth thousands when you find the right buyer. They have the biggest televisions you can find in 1962. Now, not everyone in the country had a television in 1962, and you were doing well to get a 19-inch screen. I wonder how big their TV is. I can't tell, but it might be close to 40 inches. No big deal these days, but for its time, that is impressive. In fact, they have a whole room dedicated to monitoring every inch of their building. The heat in that room probably had to be regulated by the finest air conditioning of their day, and their electric bill must be enormous. Here they have large screen two-way communications, and I know this is getting monotonous, but I'm proving the point that the stuff they end up selling would have easily covered whatever stock market problem they might have occurred. They even had access to Dr. Doom's time machine, which they just for some reason left behind, and could have used it to stop Reed from making these financial blunders, but I digress. And if you remember earlier, I said all they need is $1 million. Well, here's why. After about everything had been sold, apparently at rock-bottom prices, old Reed must be the worst at handling money, he gets a telegram from a movie studio offering them the large sum of, you guessed it, $1 million. And Reed describes this offer as a miracle. Now, earlier, he didn't want the rest of the FF to use their powers getting odd jobs because that would be a freak show. But starring in a movie using your powers for people to gawk at, well, that's different. So our heroes go out west to Hollywood, and they are so broke, they have to hitchhike. Thank you, Stan Lee. I don't know what to say. But when they finally get to Hollywood and walk onto the studio property, they find the owner of the studio is the Submariner, who apparently has taken up smoking while he's on dry land. Yes, the Submariner explains that he's always been rich, and he has uncovered more buried treasure than even he knows what to do with. Anytime a boat sinks, the Submariner goes to see if there's anything of value on board. Even his ancestors, hundreds of years ago, made a careful study of where pirates buried treasure, and the people of Atlantis have kept very thorough records. Although I guess they never bothered with the Titanic, but back to Prince Namer. So out of boredom, he's bought a movie studio, and he pays them a down payment on the $1 million he promised them. And what does the thing say? This whole thing smells fishy to me, but I sure like the feel of greenbacks. Yes, that's how superheroes are supposed to talk. Show me the money. And did you notice that he said something smells fishy? And he's standing 3 feet away from the Submariner, which is awkward at best. So what should the broke Fantastic Four do with this money after this hard lesson in life and finances? Should they take it to the bank? Should they pay first month's rent on a small yet respectable apartment or duplex? No. Reed goes to buy a tailor-made suit while Johnny declares that he's going to buy a sports car. Yes, boys and girls, these are our heroes in action. So, filming of the movie starts, and the Submariner laid plans for each of the FF and has taken Reed Richards to an uncharted isle where there's a giant Cyclops that springs up to kill Mr. Fantastic. And Submariner doesn't even stick around to film it, as he takes the film crew away. Next up, he tells the Thing that there's a big fight scene between the two of them, but the Submariner doesn't pull his punches and leaves the Thing for dead. And for the Human Torch, he tells him that his fight scene must involve some voodoo-type warriors. But he doesn't tell the Human Torch that these tribal warriors are fireproof. Yes, they're fireproof. And while all of this is going on, the Submariner goes to Sue and tells her that he has defeated her teammates, and now she should get married to him. Just then, the other three show up and start fighting with the Submariner. But Susan Storm stops the boys from fighting and says that it's not a fair fight. You see, Sue is a firm believer in the Marquis of Queensberry rules, don't you know, which has time-honored traditions and many, many rules. She then challenges the Submariner to live up to his contract that they signed, and even though he's tried to kill them on more than one occasion, the Submariner declares that his movie studio will go ahead with the movie as it should have been all along, and Prince Namor walks off into the ocean. And so the movie is made, and the Fantastic Four collect the rest of the money owed to them, which will total up to a whopping $1 million, which by next issue will have restored everything back to normal. I kid you not. And that is why Fantastic Four number 9 could not possibly have happened.